Hey everyone, this is day 4, week 1. So yesterday we did really saturated, at least saturated for me. I'm not like a super saturated painter. There's tons of other people that do like super high chroma in their paintings, but it was pretty high chroma for me. And I actually, really enjoyed. I usually introduce like other colors that are not, part of my palette when I paint like high chroma. For example, the lemon yellow, the bismuth yellow, I usually don't have that in my palette. And the introduction of cobalt blue since day 2 when we did that green painting, I kept it. So I had like bigger possibilities in my range of purples and violets for yesterday. But today I thought, okay, we did like high chroma. Let's bring it way down and let's use like Zorn palette and let's do a very controlled painting. A perfect lighting condition for a 4-color palette. Zorn palette is like a shorthand way to describe like a synthesis of a very Baroque palette, which had tons of earth tones, but we've eliminated those earth tones and we've kept the very base of the palette, which is almost like a substitution of the primary colors, but we substitute the yellow, red, and blue for a yellow ochre, which is an earth yellow, so chroma is a lot lower. Our red, people usually pick different reds for this. I pick cat red because that's my warm red. I think that's a super versatile red. And for blue, we're actually sacrificing that hue and we're using black. So what we have is a yellow, red, black, substituting for yellow, red, blue, and obviously titanium white, which is this beautiful cool color. So I thought, because I thought I was going to paint with like a broader palette, but I was like, okay, no, this lighting condition is going to be perfect, and the lighting condition is backlit in shade, so it's going to be awesome. A lot of people think, oh, light is what's interesting to paint, and light falling onto the body, let's say, or the portrait. Because light describes form, and that's where painters flourish, just describing form and describing the flow of light. But shade can be actually amazing to paint, and there's tons of little subtleties. So I wanted to do a very controlled palette just to have just familiarize myself really well with all my mixes, so I could change my hues while keeping the same values. And this is a perfect palette for this. If you're starting out, don't hesitate to just keep this palette for months, even years if you want. What you have to be conscious of is that you're sacrificing a lot when using this palette. So you're not gonna get like these, beautiful, lush, saturated yellow greens. You're gonna get green grays, and you're gonna get purple grays. So everything in your painting is going to be actually toned down. But if you don't fight it, and if you just accept that palette for what it is, and with open arms, and you find different conditions that can fit perfectly well for that palette, your mind is blown, because as soon as you start painting, you won't yearn for anything, and that's something super important. Don't wish you had another color in your palette. Just accept, the parameters that your palette, is telling you, and just work within those parameters and push them as much as you can. So I hope you enjoy this. I think it's going to be a really cool painting. And again, not a cool painting in itself, but just when you look at all the other 3 paintings that we've done during the week, the exercise is not to repeat ourselves, not to feel comfortable with ourselves. Just always challenge yourself, always find a way to put yourself in an uncomfortable situation where you have to try and solve things, through paint. That's where, painting itself, the act of painting itself, can be the most rewarding. So let's get to it, day 4. Okay, so probably the most important thing about today's session is to realize how very different it's going to feel from the one we did yesterday. Yesterday was about kind of showcasing the quality of color, like the range of color. We were exalting temperature shifts. So there are cool shadows that are, somewhat saturated. Saturated for me. I always kind of try and contextualize that because I am a more of a natural kind of neutral painter. That's what I love most. So I mean, it's not to say like I'm a little bit out of my comfort zone when I'm doing saturated colors, but in a way, I kind of am. I like it's an experience that is, I mean, it's enriching for me because I'm learning, but it's not. It doesn't come naturally. Like I'm far more attracted to neutral grays, and that's where I feel most comfortable. So I was trying to push myself to configure form through all these like this range of hues. There's like yellows and oranges and reds and purples and there's tons of like transitional grays also, but they are very saturated. Like the saturation I would consider for my painting is pretty high. For my painting and for my palette, this is super important because a lot of people are going to look at my paintings and say, well, that's not really saturated. Like, what are you crying about? Like, those colors are not very saturated. Like, you can get all these like artificial colors nowadays that are like, insanely saturated. But again, I'm talking about my own experience as a painter and the color choices that I've made. So within the colors that I usually deal with, within the colors that I know that are close to my heart, like dear and close to my own experiences and have shaped me as a painter. If you take those colors and try to contextualize what saturation means, again within the palette I've decided throughout the years to use, they are very saturated for me. Um, but today I'm back into doing what I love the most, which is grays, like chromatic grays, just pushing as far as you can a palette that is very compressed. Um, I usually people usually shorthand this palette as the Zorn palette. It's because he openly, said, I'm using these colors. Although he did use a green many times, just so you guys know, and he did have paintings that came from a far broader palette. Um, but he would actually speak about the benefits of working with white, which for us would be titanium white or lead white, a yellow, which many of us associate that yellow hue with a yellow ochre, a red hue, which a lot of us can interpret as vermilion or cadmium red, and a black, which many of us use ivory black. Uh, so he used to kind of push the benefits, the very nice qualities of this palette, um, kind of reminiscing about uh, Baroque painting. And specifically when we think about a very controlled small palette, we always tend to think about Velázquez. That's our go-to painter. It's one of the best painters in painting history. He will forever be one of the best and most amazing painters in history. Uh, and the nature of painting, specifically painting in the 17th century, was that what colors do we have available to us, and how much can we do with these colors? How much what are our options, and how we have to create all these paintings. These are a few options. Let's see how we can push them. And it's amazing. Like nowadays we have such a different notion of what color is. Like our definition of color is so vastly different from what people understood as color 450 years ago. It's just I don't think we could ever like have the exact mindset of what a Baroque painter would be. And that's one of the reasons why there's nobody that's going to paint like Velasquez nowadays. Nobody's going to paint like Rembrandt. Not because there's no extraordinary painters living today. Of course there are. It's just that we think so insanely different that it's impossible to just tap into the things that made them understand color and contextualize color, you know, again, 450 years ago. So this palette, it doesn't mean that Baroque painting was painted with four colors, but a lot of the paintings, if not almost every single one of those paintings, had, an earth yellow. They had like a saturated red, usually vermilion, or they had earth reds, and they had black, and they had, lead white. They had all those colors, and they usually used those colors to try and solve everything, almost absolutely everything. Um, the beautiful part about us, us having the knowledge that there are so many pigments available to us, like readily available, and even if they're expensive, they are nothing. It's not like buying azurite or like lapis lazuli, 450 years ago or 500 years ago. We don't have to buy semi-precious stones to have blue. So we just go to the art store, or we just, go into Amazon or Dick Blick and just order paint, and that's it. It just appears at our doorstep, and that's as hard as it gets to just get color. And of course, we have to pay for it. And yes, there are expensive paints, but they are so easy to get, like nowadays compared to before. Um, but for us, that we are conscious about how, affordable and available these this huge range of hues is to us, um, when we decide consciously to say, okay, out of all my yellows, I'm going to pick yellow ochre. Out of all my reds, I'm going to pick cad red. And out of all my blues, I'm actually not going to pick a blue. I'm going to pick a black. And for my whites, I'm going to pick titanium white, like a very kind of basic workhorse. A lot of people don't like titanium white. I actually love it. I think it's amazing. I know it's chalky. I know that if you overuse it, it tends to kind of kill the saturation of the color. It's very cool. I love it. I think it's actually tough to use because you have to use it really intelligently. If you're overusing it, then you actually do kill the chroma in your paint. But then you get a painting that's actually telling you, hey, you're using way too much white. So, kind of dial it back. So I actually love it. So again, if we consciously decide to use these four colors, because they're all colors, don't think that you're using, a yellow and a red, and the other two are not colors. The other two are like black and white. No, no, no. White is a color. Titanium white is a very specific pigment. It's a very specific color. Yellow ochre is a very specific pigment. Cad red, very specific, and ivory black, the same. They are all colors. In that sense, they're all exactly the same. Our mind should never ever differentiate from titanium white and cad red, like saying, oh, well, that's a color and the other one's white. No, 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 no. They're all pigments. They're all colors. They all have different qualities. They all have like transparency and temperature and saturation. So we from the start, we have to think of them as color. And the one big reason I've seen people think that there is a limitation to a four-color palette is because they usually don't understand black and white as colors. They only see white as a color that is going to make things lighter, and they only see black as a color that's going to make things darker. When in truth, they have different qualities. You have to start thinking of them. Yes, of course, white is going to make things, lighter. Why? Because it is super light in value. That's why. And if it's opaque, of course it's going to be like, if you mix it with another color, it's going to make it super light. And black, of course, it's going to make things darker. Why? Because its value is dark. That's the only reason. But it's going to make things dark as much as raw umber is going to make things dark, or as much as ultramarine blue is going to make things dark, or as Prussian blue is going to make things dark. Like all these colors that are essentially a super dark value. Of course, every time you mix something into them, that color is going to have an effect. So again, the easiest thing to do is to not give a color a use. Don't just think of your colors in your palette and say, oh, you're good You are good for this, you are good for this, you are good for this. No, don't give him any uses. Don't just say, oh, this is the I usually use this green to paint grass. I usually use this yellow to paint, I don't know, whatever highlight I'm painting on. I don't know. Or people usually say, oh, this is great for skin. What does that mean? That doesn't mean anything. That means absolutely nothing. What people don't realize it is that they're in a very limiting way. Again, this is it, and that's where the limitation comes from. The way we think about these colors, not the nature of the colors, just the way we think we understand them. So people say, "Oh, that's great for skin tones." What do you mean? And usually, because we are very racist when we say this, usually what we mean is like, oh, that person that has fair skin, when they are under a north lit skylight, then those those very fair people under that very cool light will have highlights that are close to this to this color. That's what people refer to. But you never hear people say, like, oh, this is great for like an Indian skin tone. What? No, that's ridiculous. It is absolutely ridiculous to think about color that way. So again, we have to instantly eliminate whatever we think colors are good for. Stop, because colors by themselves are not good for anything. They are an abstraction. Even their name is just absolutely abstract. It's just the way we've nominated these things that that we don't really understand, and we put a name to them, and that's it. And socially, culturally, depending on where you are in the world, those colors mean different things. We react as human beings differently to those colors. So there's nothing universal about a red or a green or a blue or a white. We have to realize that. So if we detach ourselves from that understanding, or detach ourselves as much as we can, because we obviously will have some like cultural kind of weight, kind of baggage with the way we see color. But if we try to step back and detach ourselves as much as we can from those definitions, then we're going to start to see color for what it is. And we're going to start to see the qualities that it has, not by itself, because again, by itself, it means nothing. Saying yellow means nothing. But saying something is yellower than something else, okay, then that starts making sense. So what we do when we start understanding that these colors are generating very specific relationships in a very limited palette, then we say, okay, I have a small playground to kind of play in, but I'm going to take advantage of every single corner of it. So if my violets are made with cad red and black, then I'm going to push those violets. If my greens are the only way I can make them is with yellow, ochre, and black, then I'm going to push those greens. If my oranges are ochre and cad red, then I'm going to push that. If you don't have a blue, what is your blue? Well, I can only make blue just by adding a tiny bit of white to the ivory black. Then that's your blue. As soon as you start accepting that those are the rules that you're playing with when you have that palette, then you start this amazing ride of painting with a very limited palette. But you have to give in. You have to. There's no point in like saying, oh my God, that's green. That's the green. That's that's the most saturated green I can make, like yellow, ochre, and black. And you look at it, and then, in your mind, you're saying, oh, I wish I had my cinnabar green, or I wish I had my viridian, or I wish I had my chrome green, or my sap green, or whatever green that you like. I don't care. But whenever you start yearning for something that you don't have in your palette, that's boom, you're gonna hit a wall. You're gonna hit a wall, and you're gonna you're not gonna be paying attention to the variables that you do have, and you have to see them as oh my God, I have so much possibilities with these variables. If and only if I accept them. That's the most important step. I know a lot of people do do mixing charts, and those are super helpful. But I've also seen people do beautiful mixing charts of all the permutations, all the possible permutations between those four colors, and then their painting sucks. And you're like, come on, you spent probably hours, like a whole weekend, just mixing all these beautiful, beautiful, beautiful mixes of these four colors, and you brought this amazing chart for everyone to see, in the studio or in the workshop or in your classroom, and then you're not using it. You didn't understand anything that you were doing. The mechanical aspect of mixing color, yes, it actually opens up your eyes, because many times we're not aware, we're not really aware of the mixes that we can get from our palette. But as you probably all know, one thing is doing that, which anyone could do. Like anyone who artist or not, painter or not, it doesn't matter. If you just bring people in and tell them, okay, you just have to mix 50% of this and 50% of that with this palette knife. Maybe they kind of they're kind of clumsy, dealing with a palette knife at first, but eventually they know how to use it. Anyone is going to be able to mix those things. That part is not hard at all. I mean, it's enjoyable, but it's not hard. That's not painting. That's just mixing colors. That when you're painting, your eye has to say, "Oh my God, this is in this case, like, oh my God, all this huge mass of this white T-shirt in shade. How am I going to paint that? It's gray. Is it gray? Like what? What am I going to mix? Like just black and white? No, because some areas are yellower, and some areas are actually more violet, and some areas are greener, and some areas are bluer. But see how I'm trying to describe those different areas within that grayness? I'm saying some areas are bluer, some areas are greener, some areas are warmer, or more orange. That's what we have to do. Our brain has to not just think of colors individually, like I've said before, but we have to say, okay, this is actually cooler than, warmer than, this is greener than something else. And as soon as you start kind of doing that kind of fine balancing act of saying, okay, I'm going to control my value, I'm going to respect my value, because remember, value is of the utmost importance. If we are trying to represent things, if we are trying to faithfully speak about how light falls onto subjects in nature, we have to respect value. It does, that's the one thing that's going to communicate how light behaves. So always, always, always respect value. Value is, how dark something is, how light something is when compared to, everything else that's surrounding it. So again, this is my lightest light. This is lighter than this. These are my midtones. This is darker than this. This is my darkest dark. And every single time, compare. Don't have your eye just land on an area of your painting. Just constantly have your eye just travel through the whole painting and compare constantly. So as soon as you teach your mind to just constantly be comparing, just all the time, our eyes have to move. They have to be almost like precocious. They don't want to stay in a single place. As soon as we land and we start and we just start awing at color, just saying, "Oh, that's so beautiful. This area is so beautiful. Look at this. This is so." No, we're lost. We're gone. Like we have to be kind of keep this energy where we're just like staring at something else. It's like, "Oh, this is a beautiful orange." No. Wait. Let me check that. Like, how orange is this really? Because if I dive into it, I'm gonna just start convincing myself of, oh God, look at this. Like, this is so gorgeous, orange. And suddenly it's like, whoa, let me take a step back. Maybe this is like, no, this was an area that was a little bit more orange than the colors that were surrounding it in shade. And you're like, wow, how did I convince myself that it was so orange? It's because we get confused. We get like distracted and we get lost in our painting. And if we're painting from life, oh my God, it's like getting lost in the Amazon. Like sometimes you're just looking at a single moment in somebody's like form, skin, or whatever you're painting. It doesn't matter. Like just this moment of light or shade, whatever it is. And if we are not in control, if we're not reminding ourselves to just constantly like check, like keep yourself in check, like step back, compare, 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 check your values again. Oh my God. Like I think we've all been there. It's like you're gone. You're gone. And what's awful about that is that many times we construct a painting based on wrong relationships. That's when everything just goes downhill. That's when we realize, wow, I took one bad decision. And a bad decision is not that, it's not that hard to deal with when you're painting. Now the biggest problem that comes with just making a bad decision is when it cascades. Like you start building other relationships, based upon that initial bad decision that you made. So that one decision is infecting everything else, every other judgment. You can't gauge anything else properly. And there comes a point where you're like, we've all been there, where you're like saying, well, it has to be lighter, but I'm actually using all my white. Like I'm squeezing just pure titanium white, and I can't make it whiter, and it doesn't look light. Like I'm trying to equate my titanium white with light, and I can't make it lighter. I think we've all been there. I mean, I'm just putting that as an example with titanium white and light, but we've all been in those spots where just we know our relationships just were just off. At some point, something happened, and we weren't able to gauge them properly, and they just spun out of control. Now, the incredible benefits of having a 4-color palette, they won't. That palette will never guarantee that you make a great painting. Like there are no guarantees when making a painting, but they minimize the risks. So, because we have just very, very few hues, and because they are not really super saturated, so if you think about it, we don't have a blue hue, we have a black, which is a bluish black, but it's a black pigment. We don't have a super saturated yellow, we have an earth yellow, so it's going to be more neutral. And a red, yeah, we can give ourselves like, a chance to make really nice kind of saturated mixes because we have that red. But that's about it, in terms of like saturation and hue. Whoop, we made everything smaller. We just really, really, really made, again, that playground a lot smaller. But it is still a playground. It is still an amazing kind of sandbox. You can still do so much with it. And that's like, I love to tell people that are struggling with color, and by color I mean, or by color I actually mean, color for me means any color. But usually people associate the word color with saturation of color, and when people say, "Oh, that's a beautiful color," they're usually referring to like super saturated oranges and turquoise greens and cobalt blues and cobalt violets, and all these things that are like crazy, have crazy punch. To me, color is anything. Like I am as much in awe of a stupid, dumb, raw sienna as I am with like I don't know, radioactive magenta or some stupid color like that. I don't know. To me, I mean, I call them both stupid. So they're all the same. But to me, it's the same. They're exactly the same. They are exactly the same. I never look at a color and say, "Oh, by yourself you're beautiful." I'm always thinking, okay, if I introduce you to all these friends that I have in my palette, what are you gonna do? Like, how are you gonna behave with the rest of my kind of pals, the rest of your pals in your palette pals? That's so lame, but I'm gonna keep that. So again, if you are conscious about the size of your palette, that the space that you're going to move in is small, is limited, it's but it's actually comforting also, because I know I'm going to make mistakes. We're all going to make mistakes when we paint. I know I'm going to make mistakes, but maybe the way to fix those mistakes, the way to understand why I'm making those mistakes, and the path to solving or to trying to get out of those mistakes is a little bit clearer because I have fewer choices available to me. Let's say something is too red, for example. Let's say I'm mixing like a gray and it has to be a little neutral, but I'm making it way too red. Well, you only have one option, and it's to use your complementary to just gray it down. So you have to say, oh, I should make that greener to make that, to tone that down. The only way you can mix green is yellow and black. That's it. You don't have like a ton of greens available to you. You don't have blues and yellows if you have to mix it. No, it's like, okay, I got to make it greener. What do I have in my palette to say green? Yellow and black. So that's it. That's the only thing I can say. That's the only thing I can use, and that's about it. Like, period. So our even though the palette is not going to be perfect for every situation out there. I mean, if you want to go paint like a freaking cerulean blue sky, beautiful sunlit day, and these green yellow pastures. No, I mean, God bless you if you want to take your 4-color palette and just really kind of push yourself and do that exercise on a bright, sunny day, with saturated yellows and blues and greens. But come on, like, you have to be mindful that you're not going to be able to get as far as you could if you had a cobalt blue, if you had permanent green lights or cinnabar green lights or whatever green you're using to paint that luscious grass and sunlight. So you can't expect like like this tree to bear fruits that it can't bear, right? You can't. So the first thing, and this is what's beautiful about painting, and this is why I tell people, yes, it has to do with paint, but it also has to do with like, almost this acceptance. And it's the accepting the nature of what we are using to paint. So as soon as we accept that, limited nature, it is limited. It's not limiting. It is limited, but it's not limiting. So that as soon as we accept that limited nature, we can say, okay, let me see what I can make with this. And for me, specifically in this painting, I was like, you know what? I'm going to push the crap out of those grays and just, make a gray painting, because I love to do those. I absolutely love to do those. But I'm also going to do this cool thing, which is, usually we speak these, our mouth just drops and we can't just stop talking about light. We always speak about light and the beauty of light, the benefit of like just modeling light, forms in light, So and it's always, a painting is always about light. People that look at paintings, observers, they usually go again in the same kind of way we were speaking about color, that people usually when they speak so gladly about color, they're almost always referring to saturation, to a high chroma. Same thing with light. Like whenever people speak about light, it's like, oh, sunlight. It's like such a huge kind of rays of light, and it, producing all these beautiful colors. We are very instinctual that way. We're drawn towards saturation because it speaks about life, and we're drawn towards light because it does the same thing. It is life. So for me, it was like, okay, we're going to take this palette and we're actually going to speak about like the raw kind of underbelly of things, like just grays, like, these grays that do have hues to them, but they are still very much so grays. They're still very much so like low saturated grays. And instead of light, let's speak about a lighting condition that is just, again, it's kind of this open shadow, because shadow doesn't just mean like Caravaggio shadow, no, like chiaroscuro shadow, like total darkness, no. So let's speak about a shadow that's open, so there is light kind of filling in, that shadow. But let's speak about lighting condition that's actually almost like rim lighting. She's backlit. So there's going to be these tiny, very few specific spots where she is going to be lit, like where there's going to be the existence of light is going to be very kind of spare, and we just have to almost like there's going to be like little islands of light that kind of connect each other, but not a lot. And I actually loved having this paper because I was like, okay, and this sense of light in the background, I just want to leave the raw paper. I just want to, because you can't, there is something, when you're covering everything with pigment, yeah, pigment by itself can be saturated and nice, but whenever you have, like, let's say a white piece of linen or canvas or, that's been primed, obviously, there is something about like whiteness just coming through that gives you a sense of light that can't be replicated with just putting opaque color on top. So I was like, I'm not doing exactly that, and moleskin paper tends to be creamed color, but I was like, I'm going to use this, this value, and I'm going to use this hue just to speak about the light in the back, and everything else I'm going to subject to that light. So this painting was just about being just insanely sensitive to tiny, tiny little changes, and tiny little changes that configure something, that speak about cheekbone in shade, eye socket in shade, upper lip in shade, neck in shade, clavicle in shade. I love to say, yes, we start with those colors, but those colors, in the end, they have to make form. They have to speak about form. We're staying with the head a lot, by the way, because I'm sticking my head so much into the frame that Danny has to cut in like super, super close. It's a very tight close-up of the face, but eventually we're gonna see the whole painting. But I actually love these sort of paintings again, where my choices are very, very small. Like the the possibilities that I have, to me, I feel they're like, they're as big as the universe, because I have never seen this palette as being something that is holding me back. It's asking me to be intelligent about my subject matter. That's what it's asking me. But that's just me being sort of sensitive to my palette. That's just me not trying to impose myself onto my palette, like saying I'm going to do whatever the hell I want with you. No, come on. Like, painting is yes, it is saying, but it's also listening. And this is a moment where you have to listen to your palette. And as soon as we do, then we're like, okay, I understand the nature of these colors. I understand not only the nature of each individual color, but most importantly, I understand the nature of choosing, consciously choosing, putting these four colors together. And now that I understand what my possibilities are, let me see if I can figure out how to make today a super simple painting. Like, Danny is backlit, just woken up. So everything is sort of kind of raw and simple about it. White t-shirt, gray background. She's in shade. The white t-shirt gives me all these like cooler, lighter colors and shade. As soon as we hit her skin tone, then it's like these, purples and oranges and reds and ochres and greens. Everything to offset, to play off of the white t-shirt and shade. And then, and this is the toughest part, having understood that we are going to kind of travel, through the sewers of color, then we say, okay, let me see if I can match an expression. If I can, sort of understand that feeling, her presence, and let me see if I can emphasize that presence through my color choices. Let me see if I can understand it first. Let me see if I can, see where it is that I can use my colors to say those things that will emphasize their expression. And let me see. Let me see if I can put all these things together. And in the end, like, this is 4 hours painting. Let me see if I can make something that says something. Let me see if I can make a painting that says something. So again, this was it for today, but it's the value of respecting and understanding the limitations we have in our palette. That's today's lesson. So I'll see you guys tomorrow. Thank you. Bye.